These two women are preparing to pull off an audacious rescue. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. Dawn's about to break. They are heading to an affluent area in central London, answering a cry for help from two Filipina live-in workers. They sent an SOS through social media saying they need to escape domestic servitude, slavery in other words, having been brought to London by a wealthy Middle Eastern family for the summer.
What we are heard from their story, they are physically abused, and it's so bad to hear, and it's so sad to hear that one of them is a rape victim.
The getaway vehicle parks around the corner. The rescuers share texts with the two nervous women inside an upper floor flat. Timing is everything. CCTV cameras are everywhere.
Just want it to be done as quickly as possible and take them out from there and put them in a safe place.
They're going down now.
And then they emerge while the world's still asleep. Ushered across the street and helped into the waiting car. They did it.
Don't worry, we are here for you. Don't. No, don't worry. Yes, you're safe now. You're crying because you're happy now. You feel safe? Yeah, okay. So don't cry to be sad. Yeah, don't worry.
The fear is in my heart, but now I'm very happy because I came out from the very hard situation.
What these women say they've been through is today recognised by the UK government as slavery, exploitation and potentially criminal.
So actually, it's so hard for the victims to give trust to anyone, especially when they don't know the person, when they don't know these people. But this is the last option, you know, to escape from that hell.
As the women drive off, an even more remarkable and daring escape is being engineered at Heathrow Airport.
Just waiting an update for Marisa.
Their colleague, Marisa Begonia, is at one of the terminals. A third woman, employed by the same family, is about to be put on a plane to return to the Middle East. The rescuer has followed her into the women's toilet, the one before immigration and security checks, the point of no return.
I found crying and already hysterical, you know, because she wanted to get away, you know. So I couldn't think of other thing but to exchange our clothes. I hid her identity, even the hair, and I gave her my hat and we changed clothes, yeah, this one. And then I took her bag. She was giving my husband, I said, no, hold your phone, because we might lose each other. Because if he grabbed me, I'm going to scream and you run away.
The change of clothes and the crowded terminal combined to dupe the family bodyguard outside. They walked unnoticed right past him and headed for the underground.
We were really running fast and we didn't look back. And I was holding her hand. Her hand was icy cold, shivering. And I held her hand until we were in the train. Even in the underground, I hid her in one corner and covered her in case we've been followed.
The rescued three are reunited in a central London cafe. The hugs, smiles, laughter are all signs of huge relief. Their identities are protected by law, so their faces are obscured.
Pero ang galing po ni Ate Marisa. Akala namin wala kang escort.
They owe their freedom to a fearless band of volunteers who've all been through similar ordeals in the past.
For me, because as I'm always saying, no human being should be abused and exploited. No human being deserves that. I've been in that situation. I'm also a victim of trafficking before, and I am called now as a survivor, and I've been in that situation. I know how it feels to be abused. They're free! Yeah! We can sleep!
We can sleep.
The rescue is just the start. The two victims must make their case to a UK system set up to protect the trafficked and enslaved, called the National Referral Mechanism. But as often happens, these two have escaped with no documents or passports, which have been confiscated by the employer. So there's no certainty in a process now so overwhelmed by demand, even for their friend, allegedly raped by someone in their employer's household. How difficult will it be to get her accepted by the National Referral Mechanism, the system to support women like her?
It's going to be really difficult because they put a higher threshold. Higher threshold means we need to submit evidence, we need to submit a witness statement, to prove that she's not making up a story.
This network of women have managed 223 escapes across the UK in the past 5 years. 4 out of 5 of these freed domestic workers are from the Philippines. And research has found that many who return home are at serious risk of being re-trafficked. The most recent rescued are now in a safe house. The Philippine embassy say their employers are likely to be the first to be placed on a banned list. Labour is the country's biggest export, and slavery one of its greatest threats.
Well, Dame Sarah Thornton was the UK's independent anti-slavery commissioner from 2019 until last year. I spoke to her from Leeds and began by asking what she made of what she saw unfold in that report.
I mean, the first thing that struck me was the courage of both the survivors and the rescuers, because clearly they were doing something that was quite risky. But it was also this sense in which it was happening in the smartest part of our capital city, and how shameful that is.
I mean, the scenes are astonishing, aren't they, for that to be playing out in London in 2023?
It is astonishing, and the problem is one of domestic servitude, and it's very much a hidden crime, so we don't know how much of it is going on. I was looking at the most recent Home Office data for April to June of this year, and there were 62 cases reported to the Home Office of domestic servitude, which is what we're looking at here. But of course, I think that that is just the tip of the iceberg, because these cases are often very hidden.
Should the police or the state somehow be rescuing these women who are held as slaves in the UK? Or, are we relying on volunteers to do the state's work for them?
There are cases that I'm aware of where there has been concern about trafficked women, maybe in the sex industry, when police will go in and rescue them and arrest the perpetrators. So I think it's got to be both aspects, supporting and rescuing people in these terrible, terrible positions.
So what can be done then to help those people who are still living a life of servitude today?
So the women that we're looking at here will have come on overseas domestic worker visas. About 18,500 of those were issued last year. And most of them will have a reasonable experience. But these workers are extremely vulnerable to exploitation because they're isolated, because they're behind closed doors, because they don't have any community connections. Some of them will just be working excessive hours. Some might have their freedom restricted, so they're not allowed to leave the home. But some, as in the case of these women, will be victims of physical and sexual assault. And so I think the important thing is what we identify and acknowledge, that these workers are extremely vulnerable. And in fact, several years ago, there was an independent review commissioned by the government to look at overseas domestic workers and see what could be done to protect them. And unfortunately, the very practical and sensible recommendations have not really been taken up by the government.
You are the UK's last anti-slavery commissioner. You haven't been replaced, have you, since you stood down last year? What sort of message does that send?
I think it sends a very bad message. And I've said before on the record that I think it's a matter of deep regret that there still is nobody to undertake that important work, not least because the government has been passing legislation which does impact on victims and survivors of modern slavery. For example, the Illegal Migration Act, which was passed in July, so just last month, has measures in it which will undoubtedly reduce the protection and support for victims of modern slavery. And so you have that sort of thing happening in Parliament with no independent voice to raise concerns on behalf of victims. So I think that's a matter of grave concern.
The Illegal Migration Act, the government says it's there to stop the boats. It says it's committed to supporting victims of modern slavery, but vital, it takes steps to reduce or remove incentives for individuals to enter the country illegally. But if you were still the anti-slavery commissioner, what would you be saying to the government about that?
I'd be saying the sort of thing that the former Prime Minister Theresa May said in Parliament, that in trying to stop the boats, and it's very doubtful whether they'll be successful in that, they have regarded victims of modern slavery as collateral damage. That was the phrase she used, and I would completely agree, because that legislation does reduce the protections for victims of slavery and trafficking, and that is a grave concern.
And you fear they could end up being deported?
Absolutely. If they have arrived in this country irregularly after March this year, then all the protections that would normally be due to them as potential victims of modern slavery do not apply. That's what that legislation does to victims of modern slavery.
Dame Sarah Thornton, thanks very much for speaking with us.